been using Gemini quite a bit lately to help capture and refine ideas, some of these around research or other topics. And what I want to share is just, is a couple of tools or a couple of visualizations that were incredibly easy to develop, but allowed me to put what might be a longer conversation into kind of greater context with those different maybe parts of the conversation. So one thing that's been happening, developing, and I've got, like all of us, many different chats, but over the course of a month or two, I go back to a conversation and step into it again and kind of plug into it. I've been using this as a way to expand a particular topic for something that I'm researching, and developing with that different references, some literature review, and trying to build some topics, add notes, and do these things. And understanding this as a pretty complex, almost non-linear conversation, certainly spread over multiple sessions, and so it's not always linear in terms of time, but there's multiple questions, and this moved in different directions. And so with that, what I wanted to share are two visualizations that came directly from my conversation within Gemini using Canvas. Let me show you what they are. I've changed the topic, and so this is kind of dummy topic within here, but the framework and the approach still holds, because I just wasn't ready to share the particular topics of the work that I'm doing. Science fiction, easy enough topic here. And so the first one thing that I was working on was developing, let's say, part of a literature review. What are a series of books or texts that I can engage a particular topic? And so I think I had 3 or 4. I started thinking about them. I added to them. And what I started to understand is that I wanted to kind of map each book or reference in relationship to one another, and within a kind of simple 2x2, 2-axis kind of grid system. And I was able to do that, and even back and forth with Gemini, reconsidering what those 2 axes might be. But what it led to was a discussion, which is different, again, from the topics that we see here, but one of the quadrants didn't have any texts in them or references in them. So started to explore that as something, and then started to understand where my research was heading and why one quadrant may have been heavier than another. So that was a nice way of using the mapping to understand these. And I'll show you how to make something like this. It's very simple, but what we see here is just a 2-axis system. Each of these are a particular science fiction book plotted against hard technology or technological realism, left to right. So hard sci-fi on the left, soft sci-fi on the right. Again, the axis doesn't matter. This is one example. Yours might be something else. And at the bottom, dystopian ideas, and moving vertically, utopian ideas. And so what we see is a distribution of different books. As I click on a node, it can provide a little bit more information. The color coding within it has to do with whether or not it's dystopian or utopian. And then the size was a sense of social influence or impact of a particular book, or how well known it is. And so this just became a way for me to look at a set of books, see their relationship within a particular maybe approach or view that I had within the way that I'm working, and to understand if I had any blind spots. So that's one example, just the simple 2x2 and mapping these in relationship to one another. The next one was that over that long conversation, I tried one thing where I extracted much of the conversation. I took it to Notebook LM, and I created a mind map. And what was maybe, it did that quite well, but the mind map from Notebook LM was incredibly symmetrical and uniform and relatively flat. And I felt that the conversation that I was having, as a way to capture the entire conversation, had places that I had kind of picked up and dropped off, and I was curious to capture the kind of different questions, the different nodes, the different topics that I had brought up to see if I could map that. And so what I asked for through Canvas and Gemini was to take my conversation and help me develop what I originally called a kind of asymmetrical mind map, or something where I could begin to capture the different topics, look for connections between them, and help me identify if there were areas that I wanted to explore or expand in more detail. I could revisit those and go into that conversation and pick up that theme and start to add to it. Or if there were any areas that I felt like the whole conversation was moving, but also just as a way to understand that maybe there were parts of a conversation that were less important to me, and that was okay. And so here's an example of, again, using science fiction as a kind of application of this, but where each node is tied to a particular question. These are less the books, and more so might just be my own conversation or notes. And we can see as we click on them, there might be a series of questions. And so this was some way to begin to locate those, look for connections between them. And then I also asked asked Gemini to help visualize whether there were key themes. And so here we see 6 themes related from a series of questions: cities as trees, machinic grief, and we can click on these. In every case, they're interactive, and so I can zoom in to more detail and be able to look at these and click on them and do that. In every case as well, the Gemini Canvas allows you to export that as an HTML. And so within the links at the bottom, I will share the 2 websites from both of these, and so you can play with them and click on them. So now what I'd like to do is just let's build one of these. I want to show you how easy it is to make something like this. So I'm going to go to Gemini, and I'm going to use thinking instead of fast. I'm going to use Canvas, and so let's start with this. Help me create a 2x2 interactive analysis mapping 10 science fiction books. Vertical axis is this, the horizontal axis is this. So when we click this, it's going to launch the canvas. And so what happens is the screen splits. It starts creating the code. This will typically be done as, or at least for me, typically that has been an HTML code. In this case, it is not. And so we can actually ask for it to be HTML. It's included 10 books. And let's see what it gives us. So it gives us the book, it gives us the 2-axis system, and as we click on this, we can locate these. So let's then say maybe we want this to be HTML. And so from the prompt, as we prompt on the left. This, we can see this is updating. We can move between preview or code. So it converted it to HTML. We can do this if we look within the code. Now we can see that. And what I would do is I would just copy all of this text into a text, all of this HTML code into a text file. And then I have an HTML file I can work with. So if we look at the preview, we've got this. We can work on color coding these things. We can do other things. We can play with it in different ways. So we can always come back in and start to tweak this with these prompts. Sometimes it gives us the size of these so we can see the dynamic scaling as we look at those. So I just asked it to update a couple of things. One is to change the nodes so that it might become a little more graphic. Rather than having the book icon, I asked for the name of the book to be within the grid, and then to change the circle color based on a spectrum from dystopian to utopian. Let's see how well it did that. It seems that it did that. So we can now see the name of the book is included. We see a little bit of a reaction. So when we click it, we get a halo effect, which I think is kind of nice. There's a little bit of this bouncing around, but here my goal isn't to refine this completely, but to just share this as a very simple way of interrogating your conversation with Gemini and to begin to visualize and map those types of things. Same is true of the other visualization of all of the nodes as a kind of network analysis. That can be done, again, just given the conversation we've been having, help me identify other types of areas, and I would use this Canvas tool to do that. Again, I'll share both of those examples as independent web pages so you can click on them, you can see how they interact. Give Canvas a try. And my hope is that this helps you identify either missing aspects of your research or understand different relationships that maybe you didn't know existed before. And this is something that can keep changing. I'm going to go back into my conversations, continue to look at particular topics, and then ask for that mapping to be updated. So as always, let me know if you have any questions, and my sincere hope is that this helps you uncover some new territory in the work that you're doing. Thanks.